America, America, make God thy gold refined till all success be nobleness and ever again divine. And you know, when I was in school, we used to sing it something like this. Listen here. Oh, beautiful, far spacious skies.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wayland Weekly Buzz. I'm your host, Susan Wagner. For this week's Buzz topic, we focus on the fiscal 2020 budget. Our guests are the Chair and the Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, Carol Martin and Steve Correa. We'll discuss the fiscal 2020 budget, what's happening with our Moody's bond rating, and what capital projects we'll be voting on at the polls on April 23rd and at annual town meeting starting April 29th. But first, these town government committee reports and other news items. We'll start with news regarding rumors swirling around the community about the two massage parlors that recently and quietly folded their tents and left town. According to Wayland Police Chief Pat Swanek, several weeks ago, a Wayland resident reported suspicions of illegal activity, possibly involving human trafficking and prostitution, to the landlords of the two massage parlors at 70 and 310 Boston Post Road, respectively. The police met with the landlords and explained that the only evidence they had was hearsay from anonymous postings on questionable websites. We didn't really know who did this or what his or her motive was, the chief said. It could have been an attempt to smear the two businesses, other massage establishments in town, or the community at large, or not. In both cases, the landlords reviewed the terms of the leases and gave the tenants an opportunity to break them based on mutual agreements. After this approach proved fruitless, Swanek then sought permission from the property owners to station a cruiser in the parking lots of the establishments. After several days, the owners informed him that the tenants had decided to move out. Next to the Board of Selectmen, who at their meeting on Monday night conferred with Town Moderator Dennis Berry and Elvis Committee member David Bernstein regarding town meeting logistics after the disruption that occurred last time around in April 2018, when a large number of handsets didn't function during the critical vote on a new library, and a near melee requiring police action ensued. Bernstein noted that there was an extraordinarily large number of voters during the library debate at that annual meeting. Further, he said the field house had been configured in a completely new way, which affected how the handsets functioned. Berry informed the selectmen that he had made a number of procedural changes, updated the handbooks, and created a cheat sheet to cover all foreseeable scenarios. If we have another large meeting, he said, we're prepared. Among the changes will be expanding the voting window from 30 to 45 seconds if 80 to 1,200 voters show up, and to a minute if there are more than 1,200. The board also announced that it will hold a dedicated meeting regarding the Town Administrator Special Act on Tuesday, April 16th. Town Council will be present, and the board will review feedback received from various boards and committees, in particular the Library Board of Trustees. Speaking of which, at its most recent meeting, the Library Board of Trustees reported that the library is embarking on the development of a new 5-year strategic plan. Every public library in the Commonwealth is required to have a current strategic plan approved and on file with the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners in order to continue to qualify for state and federal grants and state assistance. One component of the development of the plan is a survey of community needs. The library has a link on its website to this survey with paper copies available at the library circulation areas. The library has also sent requests to various groups in town, among them all town boards, committees, commissions, and administrators, asking them to complete a survey. The survey is open through April 30th. Another component of the development of the plan is a community meeting to gather in-person feedback. The library is scheduling such a meeting on the evening of Wednesday, May 29th. The outcome of the survey, community meeting, and staff input will help the trustees plan for future services to better address community needs. Meantime, new furnishings have arrived for the round room, increasing available comfortable seating in this reading area. The teen space is developing, with pricing for new furnishings coming soon, and teens requested to give input regarding color choices for the space. The trustees are also waiting to read the most recent version of the Town Administrator Special Act, which has not yet been published by the Selectmen. Trustees anticipate attending the Selectmen's meeting on Tuesday, April 16th, when the Selectmen plan to discuss the most recent version of the Act with Town Council. The trustees continue to be concerned about the governance of the library as expressed in the version of the Special Act from the January 7th Selectmen's meeting. The trustees see a proposed shift in responsibility for the library, with the town manager being in charge of the library, not the elected Board of Trustees. Wayland Reads events have attracted a great number of attendees coming to discuss the various themes around the common read of Live from Cairo. Programs have been well attended, and conversations at the programs has been enlightening, the trustees note. Next, we'd like to clarify a point we reported last week regarding the Lokerfield project moving through Conservation Commission hearings. There are 47 trees in the wetland buffer zone that will require replacement pursuant to the replacement schedule under Chapter 194. This is a requirement under the bylaw. There are 391 trees in upland areas that require mitigation by the Recreation Commission under Chapter 193. This will be part of any approved permit issued by the Recreation Commission. In other news, on April 16, 2019, a public listening workshop will be held to discuss how climate change may affect the town of Wayland. The workshop will be held from 6:30 to 8 p.m. in the Selectmen's meeting room in the town building. The goal of the workshop is to educate the public about climate change and to discuss the priority action items that have been identified to minimize and mitigate the impacts of climate change. Former town moderator Peter Gossels will hold his annual Ask the Candidates live program on Waycam on Thursday, April 18th at 7 p.m. Tom Fay and Steve Glovsky, the two candidates for the one vacancy on the Board of Selectmen, have agreed to participate. In addition, the two candidates for one seat as Associate Planning Board member, Annette Lewis and Larry Kiernan, will also present their cases during the 8 p.m. time slot that evening. Finally, Danielle Barrett, a former schoolmate of Lauren Dunn Astley, the Wayland teen who was murdered in 2011 by her ex-boyfriend, has written a play titled The Five Stages, based on the experience of losing Lauren. The play was recently staged at the Producers Club, a small off-Broadway theater near Times Square in New York. That's it for our reports this week. Here's Ken Isaacson with our interview.
All right. For this week's Buzz topic, we focus on the fiscal year 2020 budget. We'll discuss what's happening with our Moody's bond rating and what capital projects we'll be voting on at the polls and on April 23rd and at annual town meetings starting April 29th. Last year, we approved $4 million in new capital projects. This year's total is projected to be around $13 million in total. What are our options to pay for these capital projects, and what are the implications of approving this new debt? My guests this week are the Chair and Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, Carol Martin and Steve Correa. They're going to explain the issues involved and tell us all about what we can expect coming up at town meeting and all those things. So, welcome, guys. Good to have you back.
Thank you for having us.
I know you.
Thank you.
I know you love coming to these things at least twice a year.
You're used to it.
Yeah, but at least this one was fun, right? Okay, let's. I hope it is anyhow. Let's start with the operating budget for 2020. So, how much is the operating budget for 2020 that you're recommending to the town?
$87.4 million.
$87.4 million. Okay, and how much of that is an increase over last year?
So dollar-wise, it's a $2.8 million year-over increase, or if you want to look at the percent, it's 3.45%.
3.45. And what was the budget guideline you gave the various town departments and the schools for this budget? Was that what you gave them, 3.45?
Yeah, what we did this year was we created a budget guideline that was a maximum year-over increase. So it was 2.6 million plus an additional estimated 300,000 to fund an employee health mitigation obligation that the town has.
So that was outside of the 2.6, and that was
Yes.
something we needed to do, I assume.
Yes, it's an obligation we'd carried from 19 into 20. This will be the last year we have this obligation.
Okay. So does that's under your 2.8? No, actually it's 2.9. So you didn't quite hit your 3.5. You got
Right,
close
the town
to
did
it.
a great job. They came in under
The town?
under the guidelines. So.
Okay.
Hang on one second, I want to go back and say the 3.5
Yep.
is the 2.8 million.
Right. Okay.
It's don't mix the guideline in with it. And the 300 is outside of the guideline.
Right.
Because the guideline was 2.6 million.
Yep.
And then we add in the employee
This
mitigation.
mitigation
And while
piece.
we're on this, the employee mitigation actually came in not at 300, because I just said it was estimated, it came in at 340,000.
So it's higher.
Slightly higher, but it still got absorbed, and we're still presenting $2.8 million budget increase year over. So it's $2.8 million more than FY19, and that represents a 3.45% increase in the operating budget.
Okay. And what were the actual increases for the schools and for the town departments
Right.
separately?
Yeah. There are actually three components to that. So the first is the town, which was 2.98%. The schools were 3.44%. And then we have another group that we call unclassified, which is where we have some of our heavy hitter budget items. Health insurance,
Insurances, stuff like that.
retirement, pension, what have you. There are a number of things in there. And the unclassified is usually the one that increases the greatest, and it is 3.86%. But again, the combined together is 3.45.
Okay.
And you asked if this was what we thought about it. These budgets that were submitted were within the budget guideline.
Okay. So you were relatively pleased with the way it turned out, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was, if we just go off the script for a second here, because I tend to write the answers down because a lot of our stuff is technical and numerate, so I try to do that. But to answer your question, this was the first year, and I think in 3 years, the Finance Committee did not ask for further budget cuts when we reviewed them in January. We had a couple discussions about it, and then we said, you know, this is within the guidelines. We had said maximum, and it came in. So we didn't ask for any further budget cuts.
The town departments did a great job this
Town
year.
and school.
Working with the town and schools did a really great job. We did it a little different this year. We had a lot of communication, right? And any communication is
That
good,
helps, sure.
right? So, and the communication started up earlier versus kind of waiting, and then everybody's kind of throwing in their numbers, and then everybody's saying, well, wait a minute, this is what we were expecting. So we opened up the communication a lot sooner, and thanks to the town departments and our new TA, it was really a good budgeting process this year.
And this was also the first year where you implemented the new process, where you're working more interactively with the town administrator and the finance director to
Exactly.
get to these numbers and make these things happen, right?
In the past, the Finance Committee has always expressed interest in working with what we call the finance team. But our current town administrator has some strong finance background, and so it has been, the flow of communication has been greater this year than we have experienced in prior years.
Yeah. And something that really helped out a lot this year too is our liaison roles. We've always had them with all the departments. And this time we actually, instead of dragging in all the departments in front of our committee, we actually sat down with them with the TA with the town administrator and went through all the issues and all, where the budget increases were and budget decreases were. And so then we brought those back to our committee and discussed them versus dragging everybody in front of us like a courtroom, right?
Yeah.
So this year it was just a little bit more efficient. It was
great.
a lot more efficient
For the town budgets.
for the town budget.
For the school budget, we did the same system that we've used in the past, but we are also having a conversation with them about how we can smooth out our process
Next phase.
next year, maybe implement some of this. We're still working on what we're going to do, but
Exactly.
Well, that sounds
it was
promising.
much smoother.
What were the biggest budget drivers?
Well, the biggest budget drivers are always the
always the
perennial
same.
three. We're going to have personnel costs. We have year-over wage increases. We have step increases, and then within the schools, there's lanes and some other incentive plans that the various departments have. We also have health insurance. We were concerned the health insurance would come in at about 7 or 8% increase. I think it actually came in somewhere around about 5. Retirement expenses, as we have greater and greater longevity and larger staff, we have our retirement exposure increases, as does our pension and OPEB obligations. So those are perennials that are what we call budget drivers. And then every budget has a couple items that are totally unique to that budget. So in FY20, the issue that has surfaced for us is the complying with the new federal stormwater regulations. I'll go quickly on that. Is that the last couple of years we've funded about 100,000 or whatever within the Board of Public Works DPW budget. This year we had to increase that to 200, and in addition there is a capital project for 200 that is necessitated through these regulations. So that's one. The other unique item this year again was this employee health mitigation expense that we're carrying. Federal stormwater will stay with us, though. That's going to no longer be unique. That's going to
for the
move
next couple of years.
up here with these other.
So that's going to be an extra $300,000 every year?
No, that's employee mitigation. Actually, the stormwaters could be, we don't know.
We don't know yet.
We don't know. They're just it's just starting down that path.
What was it this year? It was
In FY19, we put in, I believe, 100,000 for stormwater regulations and permitting.
for 20?
And now that actually is coming on board, if you will, if that's the right phrase. We are putting 200 in the operating budget, and I think it's two into the capital.
I mean,
Do you know off the top of your head on the
I
200?
don't
No,
off the
okay.
top of my head. But I mean, it eventually will be part of our regular. It should have been part of our regular budgeting process over the years. And our sewerage has been something that's part of our roads. So it all should have been together. And now we're really taking a deeper look into it. So.
Okay. So the 3.45 increase, is that sustainable now? You anticipate looking at that being a new standard, or where does that stand in terms of next year, for instance?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because it's very
There's no standards.
It's a very interesting thing. We, as a municipality, are governed on how much we can raise taxes under the Prop 2.5.
Right.
And it's a very complicated formula, but essentially, boiling it down, it's 2.5% plus the new growth within the town each year. So you take the new growth and you create a percent. In the last few years, convert to a percent, I should say, and then you combine those two together. The 2.5 plus the percentage represented by the new growth equals the amount of a tax percent that you can increase without impacting your levy limit. So the last few years, the town of Wayland has been very fortunate to have had pretty hefty or healthy new growth, and we're experiencing somewhere on the average between a 0.6 and a 0.75% of new growth each year. So if you add the 2.5
Plus
and
0.6,
plus
or
0.6 or 3 point, you come in, and we actually say that we probably can do an average of about 3.2% each year. So in general, the budgets have been, they were in that area last year, we were a little higher, and then this year we're down back in this range. This is not an exact science. It just is basically a range to aim for. I also need to add in here that if the new growth in town were to, this is an estimate, that we're expecting about 450,000 of new growth next year for this 0.7% increase. If the new growth in town were higher or lower, that would impact the total amount that we should be looking at, the range we should be looking at to have our operating budget increase. So I know that sounds still complicated, but basically you take the 2.5 plus the new growth, understanding that the new growth percent can vary, and you put those two together for the total.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to add something?
No, you got it. I think,
Okay.
yeah.
I tried to make it a little clearer. I also have to say, you asked if these are sustainable, right? And in order for Wayland's budget increases to be sustainable, the other half of that is that every project, large project, and we've identified those as 1 million plus, need to be funded outside of the levy, which is called debt exclusion.
Right.
So because if we were to fund a large project or enough projects within the levy, we would compromise our levy limit.
And that would result in?
Operational override. Versus now the debt exclusion is, I'm using my own terms here, a capital override, that when you look for capital projects, and that's a one-time item. So in other words, we're going to buy furniture and then or we're building something, and then we override for that one project. When you have an operational override, those stay with you because you're saying we need to have this additional funding source to pay our ordinary bills, whether
Right.
it's salaries or utilities or maintaining fields. Wanna chime
Exactly.
in?
No, it's exactly right. I mean, and you know, we're below our levy limit, and it's great. A lot of towns, you know, spend right up to their levy limit, but you know, Wayland has been conservative over the past couple of years, and you know, that's something that we look at every year. So.
Well, over the past 2 years, we've heard a lot of references to free cash, fund balances, levy limitations, debt exclusions, Proposition 2.5 overrides. There's been a lot of conversation on these subjects. So we're going to switch gears and talk about the debt situation a little bit. Last year, Moody's had a number of concerns. Would you review with us what they were and what we're doing about those concerns?
Well, first of all, Moody's is a bond rating agency, and their focus is to determine that any community that they deal with is capable of meeting its financial commitments. So when they evaluate us, their concerns were with our town's financial strategy, that they felt were not what we would consider best practices for a AAA bond rated community, because that's what we are. So they will evaluate us and then measure us to make sure that we are implementing financial strategy that is consistent with the AAA bond rating. One issue that they raised, I'm going to say at least 3 years ago, because it took us 3 years to resolve it, was the use of free cash to balance the budget. They really don't like you to do that. They would like you to use free cash for one-time items, which is essentially capital projects. You know, something we're buying new playground equipment, and that's a one-time item. We're just buying that rather than an operational budget item. Another issue that Moody's looks at is the town's indebtedness. They want to see how much debt you are taking on and how you are funding that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that in a minute. So what is our bond rating as of April 1st? AAA, right?
Yep. Every time the town elects, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. Are we lucky to keep that? There was concern about that a while back, and I think just the first of the month, actually, we heard that we are maintaining our AAA bond rating, but we were concerned about what they were going to say about us going forward, right? What happened with that?
So every time a town, not just Wayland, elects to borrow money, they have, the Moody's, or whomever their bond rating agency is, will evaluate their financial situation. They will look at their strengths, and then they will issue a bond and their weaknesses, and they will issue a bond rating. So Moody's most recent reevaluation has, in fact, as you stated, resulted in us being restored to a AAA bond-rated community. We had been a AAA bond-rated community with a negative outlook. We are now just now again a AAA bond-rated community. And may I say that I'm sure I speak for a lot of people when I say we've all heaved a very collective, huge sigh of relief, over that. Not
Well,
to have that.
you've worked hard to get there now.
Yeah, I think there has been some effort, and I think that Moody's recognizes that we have made some huge efforts. I will say, in the report that they issued, one of the positives that they rated on Wayland was the fact that we are so strongly funding our pension/OPEB obligation. We have really done a great job doing a great job with that. And that is a huge plus for us. And they cited the fact that we are no longer using free cash to balance our budget. Those two really have helped us get.
So all those new financial strategies, all set up by the town administrator's office and the finance office, I mean, they deserve amazing credit for help getting us back up to this triple rate, positive rating. I mean, I can't say enough. They've worked diligently to try to, to get that back and restored. So
well, it's good to know.
Yeah. So I do want to add one more little footnote here, and that is in every report that's issued, there are always some areas that they say could result in a downgrade. So in other words, you've got this rating, but
So
if you want to keep it, you have to be mindful of certain issues. Again, don't use the free cash, but they also want us to maintain what they call structurally balanced budgets. And also focus on fund balance, which we have been focusing on in the last couple of years, and we're hopeful that we're going to stay AAA rated with no other issues.
The Finance Committee has adopted 2 metrics to measure debt levels. What are those metrics?
Yeah, the first one is that Wayland's total annual debt service to be generally 10% or less of our annual spending. The second one
All right,
is
so our annual spending is
the money we spend,
Eighty-
$82 million.
$82 million.
Yeah, before-
So that our debt service, the money we pay for the borrowing we're
for
doing,
borrowing,
right?
Right.
Yeah,
Should be no more than 8.
The debt service
0.2
technically
million.
is interest and principal.
Mhm.
Debt service is when you pay back, you have to pay the principal too. So
But that number is 8.2, right?
I am going to say I don't have that information, and I would have to verify that number with the finance director before I.
But that's the
But
number
the-
you're shooting for, 10%,
We're shooting for less than.
Yeah,
less than 10%.
Less
I think it
than.
is. I think it's
The thing is, we
8.2.
would like to be less than 10%, and so you always want to try to be less than 10%, because if something large comes along that you have to fund, you don't want to end up having to say, oh my gosh, we've bumped ourselves out
Sure.
without forethought. There are situations where you will bump yourself over, but you'd like to do it with forethought. The second metric that we use is that our total debt should not exceed 100% of our revenue.
So our revenue again is 82 million. So our total debt is no more than 82 million. I'm sure you don't want to be there either, right? Where are we actually?
I will tell you down here. So in FY19, the debt service was 9.01%, and it is going to be 8.25% in FY20.
Oh,
And there's a reason for that. The town's total debt in FY19 was 72.1%. I keep saying million today, I don't know why. 72.1%, and is projected to be 78.7% of revenue in FY20. So
that's assuming everything that's
Right,
up to
we-
be borrowed is going to be borrowed.
everything that's recommended is factored into that. So you're right. Then we would get a shored up number after we that.
As
Once
get
we go
closer.
through town meeting and we close out the year, then we
Figure
will
out
get
what
a
we
we
approve
will-
and what we don't approve.
we'll get a number from Brian,
Okay.
Kevin, you the
So
finance
why did
director.
you
so-
choose 10% and 100%
Right.
of revenue?
So maintaining debt service at 10% or less has been a standard practice of the town for many years. And I will add in that it was before you joined us, so about 3 years ago maybe,
Yeah, yeah.
the Finance Committee will periodically look at this practice, and we actually looked at it in terms of some of what our peer towns are doing, our Finance Committee peer towns, and we found that was pretty much a standard that others are doing. It's a little hard to measure because everybody counts different things in their debt, but that having a 10% marker seemed to be pretty close to what maintaining total debt to not exceed 100% of revenue is a metric that Moody's uses in evaluating your bond rating. So if you want to maintain your bond rating, you want to make sure you're
It's under 100%.
you're following
Yeah.
this metric. So we were talking about the percents of the debt service, and I want to explain that although the debt service is is projected to be 8.25% in FY20, there's yet again another little footnote. 2 large projects that were funded, or I should say approved, and appropriation made for at last year's town meeting was the Fire Station 2 renovations and some renovation work
the high school.
at the town building. At the town building. And neither of those projects have been started. So therefore, that debt service was calculated to be in the FY20. Because as you know, when you approve a project one year, it does, because of the way the town borrows, the debt service doesn't show up this year, it shows up the following year, for example. So that's the cost for the debt service for those 2 projects. Once they start, will go into the next year, and I believe they'll be started in FY21. We think that's going to be 21 now. So I do want to state that, because someone might say, well, if the debt service is down so low, why didn't you have a higher recommendation of the capital budget?
Because we have some stuff coming down the road.
We expected this number to include, I think it's about $60,000 or $70,000. I shouldn't say that because Brian have to confirm for me, but.
I thought I saw him working on Station 2 this past
Oh, in Station
year.
2, they had to do some preliminary work there. There were several projects that had to be undertaken. One
the
was that
septic
they had to
system.
replace the septic system.
Yeah.
They had to replace what they had with, I think it's a tank. Tight tank, is that what you call it? Tight
Something
tank
like that.
system.
Oh, I know about Titanic.
There was
I have one of those.
There was, yeah, there was some other prep work that needed to be done to be ready for them to go forward with the design work.
They're ready to go now, from what I've heard. So.
Well, they're readier.
Yeah, readier.
No,
Then they
spring's
were-
coming, just
Yes.
in time, right?
Yeah.
So we have many more millions of capital projects on the horizon, right? We have
Yep.
Snakebrook Dam, the local school roof, the Council on Aging Community Center, second phase of the school athletics fields. Is there anything else that I'm
No,
missed?
well, let me just say that the town, just like the regular operating budgets, they come up with a capital budget as well. And so the total departments came up with a budget, a request of about $25.7 million worth of capital projects.
For these things I've mentioned?
For everything this year. So, but not all $25.7 million got approved. So 11 of that $25 million is the high school field renovation and the Loker field.
Yep.
So those 2 capital things were taken out, and those are going to be articles, and those are going to be non-exempt debt. Exempt debt. Once we vote those and go through town meeting. So those are taken out. And then we also looked at probably another $9 million of projects that got deferred into 21 into 22. And those are projects that just aren't ready yet to, start. And that's part of the things that we do working with the departments, just like operating expenses. We look at what has been approved already at town meeting and what projects have started and what haven't started, just like the fire station. And then we compare that to our financial strategies, and we come up with what the budget should be for the fiscal year. And this year we're looking at about $3.2 million worth of capital projects that are going to be in the capital budget this year at town meeting for approval. And out of that is about $1.2 million, I think, is the schools, just in case you were wondering. One of the things that we did this year is, and we're starting to focus a little bit more on, and again, the town administrator has been kind of focusing in on this, is kind of not just looking at the projects and kind of approving them, but looking at the resources to actually do the projects. So we've had about $9 million worth of projects that haven't even started yet, or are in the process of being worked on that aren't finished. And so I think the town administrator said, wait a minute, before we start adding on all these new projects, how about if we start working on the ones and finishing up the ones that we've started? So that's almost $9 million worth of stuff that really need to be finished up. So I think, so we have this new philosophy now that we've been working with the town, with all the department heads, of not just affordability, but are there resources there to actually do the work? So that's a big thing this year. And we part of our process as well is looking at a 5-year capital plan. And I think it's one of the things that the town has been looking at, and we're concerned about a little bit, is some of these deferred projects that keep getting pushed out. They're starting to back up. So we have about $76 million worth of capital projects for the next 5 years. 7 of that is the water department, so it's roughly $69 million between the schools and the town. So one of the things that we're going to do this spring is take a serious look at our 5-year plan, and again, using that resource model as well as finance model. What can we afford to do, and do we have the resources to actually do it? And we're going to dig really deep down into the 5-year capital plan. Just in the next, and one of the things that Carol mentioned is, one of the things that we look at debt and financing, anything over $1 million, we want to, make sure that we don't keep those as part of our operating budget, right? So we have quite a few projects over $1 million. Just in the next 2 years, I think there's 6 or 7 of them that fall within that category that are over $1 million that we're going to have to seriously look at of how we're going to finance those. So again, the town administrator with the department heads are going to be working on a really tight 5-year capital plan.
So for somebody like me and maybe others who kind of gloss over when you talk about all these these terms.
That's encouraging,
Yeah.
isn't it? They're all glossing over
Right.
while we're trying to explain it
It's
clearly.
numbers.
No, you're doing a great
Why
job.
I write it down.
So you're doing a great job, and I have a question.
Volunteers.
As a result. So these deferred programs, projects that are still that haven't been started.
Some of them have started, some of them haven't started.
But you've got a lot. You've got,
we have
you
a
got
lot.
millions of
$9.5
dollars
million.
of projects that haven't been started yet.
Yeah.
How does that impact the 10% debt service that you want to stay within every year, or the amount of total debt that we can have on the books in a particular time? It's like shifting sands almost. How do you deal with that?
So, see, you've opened a can of worms
Yes,
here.
there-
Good job.
yeah. Over to you, Carol.
Yeah, I know that. Okay, so we've gone off here now. Let me just get my thought here. Okay. In the report of the Finance Committee, which is at the front of the warrant, which I'm going to mention later, we do mention that this year, that we the Finance Committee, and we have the support of the finance team as well, we really believe that the town needs to stop and create what we call a resource, and Steve talked about it, a resource-based capital plan. Not just the funding available, but do we have staff, do we have folks, can we get these things done? And
So resources
to
is
that-
not money. It's
can be both.
other things.
Staff, time,
Time.
availability,
You only have so many
equipment,
people in the building.
whatever it is that we need to do to accomplish
The job.
the project, right, complete the
I
project.
mean, even hiring outside consultants, somebody has to work with the consultants, right? I mean, town employees or a committee. And
Yeah.
So what has happened is that we have approved at town meeting approximately $9.5 million of projects that are not completed, and most of them have not been started. I just mentioned 2 large ones that are part of that process. That is just for town and school. That does not include any water projects. And does not include any projects that were funded through CPC fundings that haven't been started. So what we're saying is that we need to stop and go back and look at the resources available to do this project rather than just approving them. So that will then help us to create a more definitive 5-year plan.
That's the buzz for this week. Next week, we continue reviewing key articles being presented at April 29th's annual town meeting. Our guest will be Gretchen Schuler, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee. Find out how the CPC is proposing to allocate funding this year for 6 articles they're sponsoring at annual town meeting. Join us starting on April 21st. Remember, the Buzz airs on Sundays and Tuesdays at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. on your public cable channel, Comcast Channel 8, and Verizon Channel 37. And we're online on demand anytime at our website, wacam.tv.buzz. There you'll find an archive of past programs and a schedule of upcoming shows, along with links to documents from subjects presented on the shows. And you'll find a transcript of this week's interview, along with our committee reports, every week in the Town Crier, both in print and online. If you have a town issue you'd like discussed on the Buzz, call us email us, or use the contact form on our website. Tell us what's on your mind and what you think about the show. I'm your host, Susan Wagner. On behalf of the entire volunteer crew and guests here at Wayland Weekly Buzz, thank you for watching, and please tell your friends to tune in too.
What's the buzz? Tell me what's happening. 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 What should you want to know?